Let me give you some statistics today of likely who is in our room together. 1 in 5 of us in the room, 20%, would have experienced some kind of mental health crisis or issue, anxiety, depression, or otherwise in the last year. Half of us in the room, 50% of us, would have experienced some kinds of feelings of isolation or loneliness, either today, would we say that's where we're at, or at some point in the last year. And then this one, I have no research to back this up, but I'm just going to say it. 100% of the married couples in the room at some point in the last year have been frustrated or disappointed with their spouse. Some of the married couples are like, yeah, I thought the percentages would be higher, right? This is the reality of all of us in this room, whether we know each other well or not. And these are like complex, big issues, right? Not easily solved. I mean, companies and healthcare professionals and many people are marshaling resources and efforts to try to improve mental health challenges for people of every age and stage. As I said to you last week, the Surgeon General in 2023 in the United States declared loneliness and isolation an epidemic, saying that 1 in 2 people were experiencing it in some way. And again, trying to marshal the efforts and resources of healthcare and business and industry and people in general to try to do something about it. And of course, like fixing or improving or healing our marriages that are strained or stressed or perhaps sometimes feeling on the brink is a very complex thing. But I actually want to suggest something today, and what we're going to talk about today is something that maybe you would never think would actually be the solution or could make major changes in some of those statistics for many of us in the room and many of the cities and neighborhoods and families that we are in. And it's an unlikely thing, but I actually think is one of the keys to improving those statistics for every one of us. We're doing this actually in part of a conversation, a series we started last week called Healthy Relationships. How do we live well with the people we love? And the reason we're doing this as a community, talking about healthy relationships, is he said, hey, Jesus actually told us that to love God and love each other is the greatest calling we have in life. That is the life that God invites us into. It is what the fullest expression of a life on earth is, to love God and to love people, to live well and to have healthy relationships with each other. Also, we are a community. The church we are under no illusion, certainly in our church, that the church is a building. We don't own any buildings. We are a community of people in relationship to one another, and we have to talk about this, in part, thirdly, because one of our values at the church is our faith is about everyday life. And man, everyday life is about the strained and stressed and complex relationships we find ourselves in, and the desire that we all have to have healthy relationships. We began last week talking about the fact that we all need relationships in order to grow. Like relationships, in a sense, are the soil in which we are able to grow up to become the person we're meant to be, that we don't exist as an I and a me only, but as a we and an us. And we need relationships in order to grow, but that they don't grow by themselves, and therefore we need to work on growing our relationships. That was just the starting point. If you're like, oh, why didn't you just say that last week in 5 minutes instead of 35 minutes? Hey, if you missed it, have a listen. But that's where we started. Today, I want to begin with what I think is actually maybe the foundational relationship we need to think about in our lives that is largely unexplored. It will almost seem like a throwaway word or a little bit like, oh, that's where we're starting. But there is a reason. I think it is actually the key to unlocking many of the other things and even to improving some of the statistics that I mentioned right off the top, dealing with our mental health, our sense of loneliness or isolation, and even something that could help our marriage relationships. Spoiler alert, we're not talking about marriage today. It's some other kind of relationship that is the starting point. But I want you to hear it first, not from my mouth, and not even from the biblical writers. We're going to get to scripture in a moment, but from people who are not pastors. To my knowledge, I don't even know if they're Jesus followers. Simon Sinek, whose books have topped the Wall Street Journal list and the New York Times bestseller list, and one of my favorite authors and comedians, Trevor Noah, as they talk at the Brilliant Minds Conference about this thing. Have a listen.
what are you fascinated by right now? Because I know you're always working on something, or you're always drilling into something.
Yeah.
What are you fascinated by right now?
Well, it's interesting because the common theme that we've been hearing from all the talks today, which is the passion isn't some manufactured thing,
Right.
where you sort of find the passion and do what you're passionate. You know, passion is an output, not an input. And what we hear is somebody finds an obsession for something, and that then becomes their passion. And the same is definitely true, I'm sure, for you, and definitely true for me. So the thing that I'm sort of obsessing about right now is friendship. There's an entire industry to help us be better leaders. There's an entire industry to help us be better parents. There's an entire industry to help us eat better, exercise better, sleep better. And yet, there's barely anything on how to be a friend. And if you think about all the mental health challenges that so many of us are facing today, whether it's coping with stress, depression, anxiety, addiction, even obsession with longevity, friendship is the ultimate biohack that literally fixes all those things.
Why would you care about friendship? Friendship is like, yeah, go out with your friends, hang out with your friends. Why would you care about friendship on like a global scale? What's in it, Simon? What's happening?
So let me take one step back and try and get to an answer. Our understanding of addiction largely comes from an experiment that was done, I think, in like the 50s or 60s, where they put a rat in a cage, and there was one thing of water where it was plain water and one thing that was laced with drugs.
Right.
And in short order, the rat discovered the drug-laced beverage and loved it, drank more and more until it killed itself. And our understanding of addiction largely comes from this study. There was a guy named, I think his name was Bruce Alexander, who said, hold on, it's flawed. The whole study is flawed. Because rats, like us, are social animals. And we put a rat by itself in solitude. Of course it became an addict. But that's not what you're supposed to do with social animals. So he recreated the experiment where he put, first of all, he put lots of rats in the cage.
No way.
So it was social, community. They put wheels and mazes, and they were having kids and babies, and two waters, a plain water and the drug-laced water. And they could see from the data, they knew which ones, and they all tried enough of the drug-laced water to get addicted.
Right.
But they didn't. Their taking in of the water declined, and they only drank the plain water, which starts to give evidence that if we have close friendships and if we live in community, perhaps we're less susceptible to all addiction. And I know that there's a lot being talked about the addiction of social media, the addiction of cell phones, which is true. Which is true. It is a highly dopamine-producing device, and that it's causing loneliness. And I would argue that if we worked on the friendships, and more important, if we taught our children how to be friends, that perhaps they are less likely to get addicted. And I think...
Yeah, that's...
And I think... So when you talk about what's the global responsibility, we're teaching people how to do everything. You know, we're finding the hacks for everything. The one thing we aren't doing is the old-fashioned, hard, slow thing of making friends.
Friendship. Friendship is the baseline relationship that I want to begin with today. In many ways, because it's largely unexplored, or like Simon even pointed out in the video, in many ways, we aren't equipped at all to know how to do this, how to have friendship. And you might think, oh, well, are we doing this just because these guys are talking about it? It's like a pressing issue. It's the latest research topic for Simon Sinek. No, actually, and this is something as people of faith we don't think or talk about at all. But if you look at the scriptures, one of the main threads you will find through the whole scripture is this issue, this thread of friendship. Think about this. When God chose to save and heal and restore and renew our world, which is the story of scripture, how did he choose to do it? Well, first of all, he became human. He became flesh. Jesus Christ, God in a bod, became like us into our world in relationship with us. And then he formed a group of friends, right? The disciples, he said to them near the end, the day before he died, he said, you call me Lord and Master, and that's true I am, but I call you friends. Jesus chose to change the world by forming a group of friends. Then, in fact, if you read on, the New Testament and the communities of Jesus followers all over the place started referring to each other as brother and sister. And we've talked about this before many times at the church, that the church is a family. But let me ask you this. What is someone who is not your blood brother, but that you call brother? A friend. We even use that. I always tell the same bro, and I always tell my kids, your mom's not your bro. Don't talk like that, right? We throw that word around, but like that's a term of affection for a friend, brother, sister. What else do you call someone who's not your blood relative, but that you call family? They are friends. And then think about this. This may be encouraging for some of you, or disappointing for many of you. Marriage, right, which we would say is the highest sort of form of relationship in the world, and it's what so many people are trying to find a marriage partner or life partner. Many people in the room are married. And we're going to talk about marriage next week. But you know that Jesus told his followers in the new creation, the new world, the place that all of this is heading, this new world that God is going to make for us, there will be no marriage. That marriage is not the eternal relationship, even though all lovers on their wedding day want to believe their love will last forever. No, marriage won't last forever. Eventually, it will just be replaced by friendship, that we will all be brothers and sisters together. Friendship is the thing that lasts forever. This is actually all the way through the biblical storyline. And so we need to talk about this, that friendship is incredibly important for us in our lives. It is one of the defining marks of how we relate to God and how we relate to each other. But we don't talk about it that much. I mean, maybe it's because it's like, oh, it's a given, like you're going to have friends and everybody has friends, or you try to get more, or you need at least one friend. It's kind of this given, and somehow like we're just supposed to know how to do it. And then even Facebook like has stolen the word and turned it into something else. So we need to steal it back and actually talk about, well, what does friendship look like? Before we kind of get to the biblical explanation of it, or the words that I think will give us really what are the two essential ingredients to what a good friendship makes a really good friendship, I want you to take a moment with a couple of people around you. Just take a moment to discuss what makes for a really good friendship. And maybe it's like a theoretical thing in your mind, or maybe it's something you've actually experienced. Oh, I have this great friend, and this is what makes up our great friendship. So take a few moments, talk to each other. What makes up a great friendship? All right. Well, I'm sure you came up with some really good ideas. Maybe some of you are like, hey, that's good. I'm going to try that. Or like, oh, I'd like to have a friendship with like that. Let me guess what you didn't come up with. Probably what you didn't say is, hey, what makes for a really good friendship is someone that I see from time to time, maybe even on a weekly basis. We talk about pretty much the same things every time we meet. We might go away together once or twice a year on vacation or overnight trip. But I don't really know, or like they don't know my hopes and dreams and fears and addictions and challenges. And I don't think I really know theirs. And, they have some things that in their life that maybe I'm a bit concerned or worried about, but I wouldn't want to say anything about it because I wouldn't want them to think I was judging them and we're not that close anyway. Chances are you didn't come up with that as a definition of friendship, but that describes so many of the relationships, the friendships we have. So what does it actually mean to grow healthy friendships? Well, today we're actually going to look at one of the wisdom books, part of the wisdom literature in Scripture, the book of Proverbs, some sayings about friendship to help us understand actually the two key essential ingredients to a really great friendship and what it does it mean to grow healthy friendships. The first is actually from Proverbs 27:10. Listen to what the writer says. Never abandon a friend, either yours or your father's. When disaster strikes, you won't have to ask your brother for assistance. It's better to go to a neighbor than to a brother who lives far away. I think one of the things that this verse is saying is one of the essential ingredients to a healthy friendship, and that is proximity. Proximity. Being regularly close to and present with someone else. Proximity. You cannot actually build a good friendship without being in regular proximity to someone. Someone you see regularly, someone you talk to regularly. The verse says, hey, and listen, think about this. In the ancient Near East, blood relatives, brothers, sisters, family was everything. Those are the people who looked after you. But the writer says, listen, when disaster strikes, it's better to go to a neighbor than to a brother who lives far away. In other words, why? Because the neighbor's closer. What you need is someone who's actually in proximity to you. They will become more of a brother, really, than your blood relative who lives somewhere else. Because why? Friendship is about proximity, being close, being there when someone needs you to move or a crisis or whatever. That is an essential ingredient. And I know this sounds obvious, but really it's actually something that we've, in a sense, a little bit lost sight of, because being frequently digitally connected to someone is not the same as proximity. Right? Think about it. Social media has taken this word friendship and turned it into people that we kind of watch their lives on Instagram or whatever. We scroll and maybe we like and we heart and whatever, but that's not closeness. That's not actual presence. That's actually something you're doing alone. It's not something you're actually interacting with someone about. Now you may message them or whatever, but if you're messaging them, what is that? That's regular closeness. That's keeping in touch on a regular basis. And think about this. We know that in any significant relationship in our life, proximity, presence, being close to, literally close to, and regularly connected to in conversation and time and touch is essential, right? If you think about a couple that's dating long distance, maybe they met at schools overseas and now one lives in Vancouver and the other one lives in Europe, and they're dating for a while. And eventually they get serious and then one of them flies over and they propose and now they're engaged long distance. And what are they hoping to and working towards? The day when they'll finally get to be together. But if they said to you, hey, we've decided for the rest of our marriage, not just for a season, we're going to be married, but we're going to stay apart. I'm just going to stay in Vancouver and they're going to stay for the rest of our marriage. We're going to be married like that. We would say to them, you can't be married like that. Okay, if one of you is waiting to get your green card or papers, fine, but the goal is to be together in the same room. You can't be married like that. You have to be in the same house. You have to hang out together. You have to hug each other. You got to do what married people do. You got to eat meals together. You got to go and hang out with other people and drive each other to each other's work and whatever. That, it's proximity. We know this. It's obvious. Likewise, you don't have a parent saying, I have this child, but now I'm going to take a job somewhere else, but I don't think it's right for them. So I'm going to leave them in this country and I'm going to go and parent them digitally because you know what? They have these great video baby monitors and I can talk to them over FaceTime a lot, but someone else will change them and feed them and clothe them and take them to school school and help them when they've scraped their knee and then help them figure out, when they're going on their first date and take them to prom and all that. It's like, you'd be like, what? You can't do that. Like, you can't parent someone digitally. You can't be removed from them. You have to be together. You have to be in proximity. We know this. So why would we think that we don't need that for friendship? That we actually need to be together. And here's the thing. The enemy of proximity in our friendships is an overcrowded life. An overcrowded life. Remember, we talked about last week how relationships are the soil in which we grow, but that there's different types of soil. Like we want good soil for our relationships to grow, but we can have soil that isn't good. And one of the not good types of soil we mentioned was weedy soil, where there's other things, an overcrowded life, other things that aren't as important that are growing, that are sucking away the life and time and energy and nutrients that we need to actually grow our really important relationships. And oftentimes, an overcrowded, weedy, busy life is the enemy of true friendship because it makes proximity hard because we don't have the time. We have crowded our lives with other things. We take on extra work to try to get a promotion, or we take on an extra job to try to make a little bit more money and have a side hustle or start a business, or we take on extra courses so that we can add letters after our degree, or we take on extra activities for our kids. We put them in gymnastics, we put them in this, and we put them in that, and we've added other stuff, or we add subscriptions, we add things we're doing, and we've crowded our lives without regard for the fact that we are sacrificing friendship. One of the things Simon Sinek said in the interview, he said, we often talk about needing to sacrifice things for where we're going in life or for this season or to start a new career. He said, but we always mean relationships. He says, we always mean, when we say sacrifice, we always mean we're sacrificing friendship to do that thing for the job or for the work. And I know, there's such a thing as a busy season, right? When you've suddenly started a new job, or you have a new child at home, or something has changed, and there's a season where you don't have the energy for proximity in your friendships. But be careful, because the season can simply become a way of life where we prioritize other things that are sucking away the life and time that we would have for friendships. Think about the fact that people will move cities and towns and sometimes even countries to be closer to work, to have a bigger house, to have a better job, to have a lower cost of living, without any regard for the fact that they're leaving friendships behind. Nobody says that, right? It's like, oh, I got to move for a job. And no one says, well, what about your friendships? And even if you feel like that as a friend, who's someone who's moved, you feel bad saying it because clearly the bigger house or the lower cost of living or the better job or being closer to work is way more important than friendship. And yet people live in the bigger house or with the better job. And quite frankly, the lower cost of living or more square footage does not do anything to deal with your feelings of loneliness, isolation, anxiety, depression, or sometimes put even more pressure on your marriage because now we've cut off all of our friendships. Now it's just the two of us. Gosh, this better work, right? We don't even think about that when we're making those decisions. Proximity is essential. It is the first ingredient to be regularly close to people in order to build that friendship. But the second one is vulnerability. Look at Proverbs 27, verse 6 and verse 9. He says this, wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. Wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. And the heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense. What's he talking about here? Wounds from a friend or heartfelt counsel. This describes vulnerability. See, proximity, being close to people like physically and presence in their life and regular connection and conversation is the baseline. But without vulnerability, you cannot grow a friendship. And he describes two types of vulnerability, wounds from a friend or heartfelt wisdom. Let's take the heartfelt wisdom. What does it mean to explore vulnerability? That actually heartfelt wisdom means our emotions are involved in our conversation and connection with each other as friends. Where we are not just sharing advice or hey, check this out. I found this new way to, change my tires fast, or this great oil for my car or hair color, whatever. But heartfelt exchange of wisdom and life and counsel and trust. What does that even sound like in a friendship? Words that are heartfelt wisdom or exchange or inviting heartfelt wisdom or sound like, I need your help. Those are expressions of vulnerability. I'm really not doing well. I have a decision to make. Can you give me some input? I haven't told anyone else this, but is there anything you've been anxious or troubled about lately? And I love you, right? I love you. Those are heartfelt words of a friend that invite and share wisdom and counsel. It's vulnerability. It's not just proximity. It's actually taking the relationship deeper in vulnerability. Those are the words that friends exchange with one another, heartfelt words of counsel or inviting input. And then what about this wounds thing? Wounds from a friend, he says, are better than kisses from an enemy. Kisses from an enemy is this idea of flattery. Oh, you're good. Everything's good. And we live in a culture that says, oh, your friends just back whatever you want. Oh, you're fine. I'm so glad you're happy. As long as you're happy, or you do what makes you happy, or you do you, or love is love, or whatever. And it's like, no, that's not true. Sometimes friends need to wound each other, not by punching each other or saying mean things. But he says, wounds from a friend. In other words, hard conversations. Words that sound like, when you said this, or when you did this, I felt hurt, or I felt angry, or I felt ignored, or I felt rejected, or I felt slighted. Those are hard words to say and hard words to hear. Words like, I'm worried about this in your life. I see this. I'm worried about it. Words like, you might be wrong about this, or you might be making a bad decision, right? Those are wounding words. They're hard to say, hard to hear. I've noticed this about you. Hey, whenever we're in a group, you say this or you tend to do this or whatever. Those are hard words to say. Those are vulnerable words, right? The person saying them and the person receiving them is putting themselves out there. And here's the thing. Proximity in friendship without vulnerability is the other type of soil we talked about last week. That's shallow soil, right? There's lots of friendships that we have, the proximity, and people we always play sports with, or our drinking buddies, or people we work with, people we see every day or every week at church, but we just talk about the same things, and how was your week, and how's your job, and how's sports, and what about this, and what are you doing today? But we never get past the surface. We're never saying any of these words of heartfelt counsel or hearing them, or never actually broaching the difficult conversations, words that might come off as wounds, but can be trusted, can be sincere, are good. To actually take our relationships deeper. People we have had lots of proximity with, but we've never gone deep with. Part of the reason we don't do this is we have a great fear of being known and knowing each other. Right? We have a great fear of saying some of these things, of someone really seeing and knowing who I am and what's underneath and what I'm really about, or the fact that I'm not doing okay at all. And even though nobody died and I didn't get fired, I'm not doing well. But we have a great fear of even just picking up the phone and saying that. How do I deal with this? We have a great fear of someone seeing and saying something about us that isn't pretty, right? Because our worst fears about us is that the things that we hate about ourselves, others would actually notice. And so we have a great fear of being known by other people. And we have a great fear actually of knowing others, right? Like, oh my gosh, if someone tells me that things are not going okay in their marriage, or their mental health is suffering, now what am I going to do? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I can't help them. So I have a fear of actually knowing you as well. And this is as old as the earth. Do you know, if you go back to the beginning of the Bible and you read just the first pages of how things happened in the way our world described, you know, one of the things it says, the very first thing that happened when sin and brokenness came into our world, shame came in, psychological shame. They're human beings who at one point were naked in front of each other and felt no shame, suddenly felt the need to cover up and hide from God and from each other. It's this idea that shame, we are afraid to be seen and known. We are afraid to be naked with one another. I'm not even talking about physically. Actually, we live in a culture where it's very normal for couples who are dating or whatever, or even who met the first time, to be physically naked with each other, but to be emotionally closed and covered up. We are very afraid of being known and being seen, and we don't know what to do with knowing and seeing another person as well. This runs so deep in us because our great fear is rejection and shame, or the things we believe about ourselves will actually be true, and someone else will say, yeah, I think that about you too, or I see that brokenness, or I see that flaw, or that thing that you do is really bumming me out as well. That is our great fear, to be vulnerable. But the writer of Proverbs says, hey, deeper friendships are better than easy friendships. Deeper friendships are better than easy friendships, to actually be in community with each other, to actually be close to each other. Why does this matter so much? Well, because proximity and vulnerability are essential ingredients for love to take place in a friendship. Right? We talked a couple weeks ago how Jesus says, the greatest command is love God with everything you have, and also the greatest command is love each other. But we said how love for God can sometimes be this kind of nebulous thing, like, what is that? Is that worship? Like, does God need me to bring him a meal when he's sick? Like, what does it mean to love God? Can sometimes be a little bit nebulous, but loving each other, way more practical. Proximity, vulnerability, those are way more gritty, way more practical, way more real. These are the ingredients of how love begins to grow in a friendship. And yet we just have to be honest with ourselves. This is why friendship, true friendship, is so hard. Proximity is practically hard. Like, how do we find the time in a very busy life, in a very busy 21st century, in a very busy continent and world? How do we find the time to actually invest, like to do reps, to have time with people in proximity? It's practically hard. And vulnerability is emotionally hard. How do we get past the surface of everyday stuff to really where we are known and we know another person? Where we are able to share, where we are able to say some of those words that I said earlier that take a relationship, a friendship deeper. And one of the reasons that this is so challenging is because we're spending more time alone than we've ever spent. Right? It is so much easier now to be alone. We can order in and we can just kind of text our friends instead of actually picking up the phone and seeing them. We can, we end up working. So many of us are working from home now, or working offline, or asynchronous learning, or like a bunch of those things that I said before. That means there's hours and hours and hours, and nothing against Zoom and Microsoft Teams, but that's not proximity. That's just digital interaction. That's not knowing another and being known. That's not actually being in the same room. That's not actually growing in friendship. And so we are spending more and more time alone. And so the thing that feels like we want to do the least at the end of the day is pick up the phone, or go out for a coffee, or go out and find someone, or see a friend we haven't seen in a while, or go away for the weekend with someone. The thing we want to do the least because we're so used to being alone may be the very thing we need the most. But we're so out of practice because we're spending so much time alone. And it just seems so much easier at the end of the day to stream another show than pick up the phone and call someone and say, I'm not doing well. I'm feeling kind of off, or we're struggling in our marriage, or I feel really in despair about my work. Right? That seems way harder than just, I'll have a glass of wine, I'll watch another show, or I'll text some stuff and I'll play some video games. It's harder to do the thing that we need the most. Married people, can I just say this? You have to invest in your friendships. Ladies, your husband can be a friend to you, and you need to learn. Yes, marriage is a friendship, but he can't be your only friend. He cannot bear the weight of all of the things that you want and need emotionally from someone. And I think we do this to each other in marriage. It's one of the reasons why our marriages are stressed or strained or falling apart at a greater rate, is the expectation we bring in that that person is going to be everything to me. No one person can be everything to you. It's the lie we're told. I'm like, find this one, your forever person, and all of your emotional and physical and psychological needs will be met. You need other friends. Like, and I don't mean other opposite sex friends. That's how affairs start. Is like someone's like, oh, well, I'm not getting this, so I'm going to go find it somewhere else. No, find friends. People that can hug you, people that can hang out with you, people that can talk to you about what's really going on in your life. You need other friendships. Guys, stop outsourcing your social calendar to your wife. Stop just letting her make all of the social plans for you, because sometimes all the couples that you hang out with people may not be people that you meet with. It's rare, actually, that a couple with another couple, that the guys get along and the girls get along and the four of you get along and it all really works. Maybe for proximity, but not necessarily for vulnerability. So guys, you have to take responsibility for your own friendships, not just deal friends, as someone says, but real friends. People that you have proximity with, memories, experience, time, laughter, stories, daily hangouts, side-by-side stuff, but also vulnerability. People you can actually level with. If you're battling addiction, I've had so many conversations with guys, especially when it comes to battling porn addiction. They're like, oh, I have to stop, the only way to beat this is to stop doing it. That's just what I have to stop looking at porn. Stop doing something is not the way to kick an addiction, otherwise you would have already done it. What you actually need is accountability to do something else instead. I talk about having accountability to have friendships. When was the last time you had a good hangout with a good friend? Because underneath every kind of addiction, and especially a porn addiction, is a longing for intimacy, to be known and know another person. So where are your friendships at? Where's your exercise at? Where are you doing things with other people that are healthy and growing that will eventually make this other thing feel not as satisfying as it used to be? That's how you grow out of that, by growing into friendships. Now listen, I know that this is not easy or automatic, and there's things beyond your control that sometimes shape whether your friendships are thriving or not. But the two things we do have within our control are proximity and vulnerability. And not so much thinking, well, how come I don't have any good friends, but how do I be a good friend? And so I wonder, maybe we're all busy, and maybe this doesn't apply to everyone, but I wonder if each of us has a little more time in our week than we think we do to begin to invest in proximity and vulnerability. You can't have vulnerability without proximity, right? You're not going to be open with someone that you're not in regular connection with. And so proximity is the starting point, but we need time for both. And so I just want to take a few minutes as we end here just to ask you a couple questions to audit your week, to see maybe it's like finding $20 in your pocket. Maybe there's a little bit of extra time that you have that you could begin to invest in a friendship. Think about, and let's just kind of add this up mentally. How much time do you spend on social media that isn't messaging your friends? Some of it just maybe messaging your friends and connecting with them. But how much time is just scrolling? And like liking something that they think, or forwarding it on or reposting, that's not time with your friends. That's time. They didn't even know you did that, maybe later. That's like, so how much time are you spending on that? Doom scrolling. How much time streaming or watching? I don't watch a lot of TV, but I love sports. I watch sports every week. There is definitely time. And oftentimes I watch that on my own, or maybe with one of our kids or something like that. But that's not cultivating a friendship with someone outside my family. How much time are you spending streaming or watching? How much time working out on your own, right? There's some things that we do on our own that we don't need to do on our own. We could actually ask someone else to come with us to the gym or go for a walk. Time walking the dog on your own. How much time is spent doing that? What about time commuting to work or school? I noticed on the school buses, like during COVID when they restarted, everybody had to sit 2 or 3 seats apart. And now COVID's over and everybody's still sitting 2 or 3 seats apart with their headphones in and nobody's talking to each other. Or maybe you're commuting to work and you never think to pick up the phone to make a phone call. I always call people on my way or back. Like, it's a great time to catch up with people. It doesn't have to be all the time, but if it's never, this is alone time that you could use to cultivate some proximity and maybe some vulnerability. What about grocery shopping or errands? How many of those do we do on our own? I was just talking with somebody this week who says, my friend called me and says, hey, I'm going to be at the grocery store 5 minutes away in 20 minutes. Want to come with me? Do your errands together. What would it take if you add up those hours? Maybe for some of you, that's like 2 hours a week that I just said. For some of you, it might be 3 hours a day that you're alone, that you could take some of that and invest in growing a friendship. To pick up the phone, want to chat, need to debrief my day, or you want to go out tonight, or hey, I got to go for a walk, or we should start trying to go for a walk once a week together. This is not an everyday thing. This is about taking time that's alone and repurposing it to begin to allow proximity and vulnerability to grow. Here's the beautiful gift about this. We are a community. We, the church, are a community. It's actually why we stopped online church a while ago, because we're like, there's no such thing. There's no such thing. You cannot be in a meaningful community online where you don't see each other, where you're not. There's no chance to be vulnerable. It doesn't ever eventually get to that. You don't have much proximity, and you won't get to vulnerability. And we said we're not going to do that. We want people to be in the room together. It's why we multiplied sites to be closer to where people are, so that people weren't commuting as much. So the chance to be in local home groups, to be in proximity and vulnerability together, there's a higher chance of friendship forming. And so the great news is, if you're new here or new-ish, or this is home for you and you are cultivating these relationships, what does it mean to continue to invest? That you have this community that is a gift for you to allow you to grow in a friendship that really ultimately is the baseline to teach you what does it mean to be a friend of God, and what does it mean to be a friend to the people around